in a while for traditional African music. We also have other players in a larger group called Mayasole Afro World Fusion Music and Dance Ensemble. There's some poster up here that'll tell you about a show coming up February 20th, next Thursday, down in Puyallup at Pierce College. And we do play around the Seattle area, so keep an eye out for us. We have some CDs for sale. That's mostly the electric group. There's a few traditional tunes on there, but it's mostly the electric group. And that CD was, when it came out, was nominated for Seattle Area Music Innovation and Excellence Award. We're very proud of that. So if you like the music, just drop $12 in the box there and take home a CD with you. And also you can take home a card if you like it. And I do want to mention that Laura Chiora Dai has her own ensemble, the Sukhothai Marimba and Dance Ensemble. So keep an eye out for them. If you don't know them yet, basically they're probably the best marimba group around in the Northwest. And we won't talk to Sherry and Nzanga about that, but you know, they're among the top. And also, Nabi has his own group, and he's coming up here at Fascia Ethiopian Restaurant. And the date on this, Nabi, is March 4th. So that's coming up in early March. At that restaurant is down in the, what do they call that district? Columbia City, yes, Columbia City. Fasika restaurant. So you can talk to Nabi about that. And Mohammed has his own group called Afro Blue Trio, which plays, and we borrow from his tunes liberally in this group. And Tendai, of course, is, man, he's the rap master. He's like going to the top, man, with the thing. So keep an eye out for all these folks. And thanks again to Preston Hampton for putting this together and all the folks helping out with the fashion and everybody else. So I think we got a little bit more time here for you. Let's see, John, are we ready for the second fashion show set, or do you want us to do another one? Another one? Okay, we'll do another short one for you.
Let's do Sankofa. Hadi Blue.
We'd like to feature another tune from Mohammed with a Ghana style called Hadi Blue.
Mankani, 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 mankani koliko. Mankani koliko. Mankani, 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 mankani koliko. Mankani koliko. Tatale, 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 tachia, shae, tatale. Mankani, 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 mankani koliko. Mankani koliko. Mankani, 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 mankani koliko. Mankani koliko. Tatale, 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 ashae tatale. Hadi Blue. Hadi Blue. Hadi Blue. Mankani, 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 mankani koliko. Mankani koliko. Tatale, 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 tatale.
Tatale, tatale, ashae tatale. Menkani, 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 menkani kuluko. Menkani kuluko. Tatale, 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 ashae tatale. Tatale, 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 ashae tatale. Hadi blue. Hadi blue. Hadi blue. Hadi blue. Mankani, 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 mankani koliko. Mankani koliko. Tatale, 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 ashae tatale. Mankani, mankani, mankani koliko. Tatale, tatale, tatale.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of Seattle Insight. My name is Natasha Smith. Joining me this evening to talk about some post-primary issues. We've got a distinguished panel of folks joining us here tonight. It seems sort of odd to be talking about political things considering the events of the past week and the attacks in New York. And of course our thoughts and prayers go out to the folks who are dealing with the aftermath there. We also, though, do have to continue on with the business of the city, just as New York is trying to do, and D.C. as well. We had a primary election last night, trying to narrow the field a little bit as we get ready to head into November. Joining me to this side is Jove Parrish. You are a co-editor of Eat the State magazine, which I find very interesting. We'll talk about that a little bit, but also a writer for the Seattle Weekly, which is where most folks will probably know you from.
Right.
Excellent. Over here we have Kathleen Allen, a political strategist with Campaign Connections. Former reporter, actually, with several newspapers, including the New York Times and the Anchorage Times, training candidates to run for office.
Still in yet.
Okay, so you've got some interesting insights, I'm sure, on that side of it and how that end goes together. And also Josh Feit, an editor at the Stranger newspaper, and you are no stranger, of course, to politics. You told me you were originally from Washington, D.C.
It's true.
Okay, so obviously a political upbringing there, and came here by way of Portland, a newspaper down there. So glad to have you all joining me this evening. There are a lot of issues that have been talked about, and also I think some people are going to say have not been talked about in the election or the lead up to the election last night. If you are joining us tonight, this is the 19th. The show is live tonight, and we do want you to call in, get some of your insight into this show and to some of the issues we're going to be talking about. If you want to call in, that number is 206-684-TV21. That's 684-8821. We'll take your calls in just a little bit. But I do want to talk about, we've got this huge field of candidates that folks were having to kind of decipher and roll through as they went to the ballots last night. Why such a huge field, do you think? Does that say there are, a lot of folks out there clamoring to get a piece of the leadership action, or is it just people are kind of disgusted with the leadership that we've had over the past few years?
Well, we had a perception of a mayor in trouble, which ended up being a perception that bore out through the end of the evening. But a lot of the people who ran for mayor, frankly, were not what I would call credible candidates. They got less than 3 or 4% of the vote. I was surprised that Charlie Chong pulled less than 8% of the vote. He traditionally pulls 10 to 12 or more percent
Very
of the
high
vote.
name recognition with him being a former council member and very active over the past few years.
Yes, in fact, up until last week, the numbers were quite different. I mean, last night, in the last week since the disaster, the truth is that numbers really did polarize around the top 2 candidates in terms of Greg Nichols and Mark Sidran, with the mayor losing even the substantial ground that he had held through most of the year. Our polls had showed him running between 25 and 28%. Obviously, he settled in at about 22%.
I wanted to ask you, I mentioned you're with Eat the State, and you're sort of a masthead, if you can call it that when it's online. It says you're anti-profit, anti-corporate state.
Oh, well, I suppose it could say that.
Yeah.
I don't think it says anything about profit in it at all. But that's a community newspaper that started several years ago, and as a result of that, I wound up getting offered a column, which I took with The Stranger, and then the weekly hire being away from The Stranger, and I've been there as their political columnist for the last 3 years. And for the last year or so, I've been doing a lot of stuff nationally. So that was sort of the place that I started, and other people really have been more active with it recently. But
coming from that background,
but
though,
coming from that background is one where there's some degree of skepticism about people's ability to have control over the political process, and big money's ability to corrupt a campaign, and we saw that in the mayor's race, where you had, some of the sort of fringe candidates who were on the ballot are, frankly, I think, a little mentally unhinged. But there were a handful of them on there, I think, who were really serious. I mean, Scott Kennedy comes to mind, but who really don't have any way to get a traditional foothold into the political process if you're not already
bankrolled.
If you're not bankrolled. In the case of a mayor's race, of course. Traditionally, to run credibly for mayor, you've had a political office before then. But even so, it takes so much money to run a credible campaign for any kind of a citywide or countywide race that it's really prohibitive to most people getting in and being directly involved in the political process. And I think a lot of people, in one way or another, are frustrated about that.
Does that mean that we should discount like the wider field of candidates beyond those top 3 or 4 that we know the name of?
I was just going to say, first, I'm not sure that this year was abnormally big field of candidates. I think every year you've got a whole slew of people coming in, and sort of the more serious, and then the less traditional candidates. I was also going to say, I don't know if I'd count Scott Kennedy as. I mean, he took himself super seriously.
Yes,
I don't know that he had a serious track record.
He wanted to be a serious candidate. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. But I forget the question.
He didn't lay some of the groundwork in terms of being involved in the community and things like that. But and there really was a lack this year of candidates in sort of that middle ground of people who were less well known, but who had been involved in the community, had some kind of a constituency. It was the top 4, if you include Charlie, who was a former office holder, and then a bunch of people nobody had ever heard of.
Yeah, it seemed like the main people who challenged the council incumbents, you had a couple of, Michael Preston obviously has been on the school board for such a long time, so people know him. Grant Cogswell, who had been a big activist at the monorail, so he had some name recognition. And then Kurt Firestone, who's run before from just sort of traditional left position, so there was some name recognition. But
I sort of expected that the incumbents would not do as well as they did. And I'd have to say that usually anytime an incumbent gets less than 50%, what happens is they freak and they're all nervous about it. But, I think that given these times, particularly since last week, I think that there's a lot of the voters, even traditional voters, who were voting things like stability, security, and that's where incumbents look much better than they otherwise would if they
although the
if they
main
were working.
incumbent got 22%.
Yeah.
There was a difference in terms of public safety there. I think that actually played to hurt him, that it reminded people of WTO. And all of the terrorism of last week did remind
Pat
of that.
Davis for Port of Seattle also did surprisingly poorly as an incumbent, and she's associated with WTO. The other thing that I think helped incumbents, though, is that the low turnout. So that the people who are voting are the people who
The diehards are gonna go out there.
The diehards, the people who follow politics more seriously, and the more conservative and older people who are more likely to go with an incumbent.
In fact, that's a good point, given the fact that I really had expected with the hundreds of thousands, well, actually it is 100,000 or now, that were streaming into Seattle to do the Seattle Center throw flowers in the middle of of our fountain. The truth is if there was anything you would think that they would do in the name of democracy, they would vote. I think we were going to have an astronomically low turnout for yesterday, and I had anticipated it would blip up to like 30%. And it didn't. I think it's going to end up at being about 20 to 22, a new all-time low. And I figure if you know, the events of last week and the 8,000, you know, flags per square inch now isn't enough to motivate people to vote. I don't hold a lot of hope that it's going to end up getting any better than this.
Well, I talked to several poll workers during the day who were saying they had never seen it that slow. I mean, a couple that I talked to at midday who'd had like 3 people come in all morning, and it was, I mean, it was astonishing. I was actually surprised it got up as high as it did toward, you know, when all the votes were counted. You know, we're getting more absentees now, but I thought that because the election had not been in the news for the last week, you know, it's usually only in the news for a couple of weeks after Labor Day. People don't really start paying attention until then. And we missed one of those weeks, and we missed a week where a lot of people were focused on something else.
Yeah, and the TV commercials got taken off the air, so people didn't realize Nichols in particular. Yeah, and that was supposed to be his
Except for Sidran, and Sidran did very well. He got his commercials in early.
True.
Yeah.
I think that is important in terms of you take a look at what was on top of people's minds. We were in the field with focus groups last week on Thursday night when people actually were talking a little bit about what was on their minds. And there's a whole lot more good, you know, people tending to be better, nicer, waitresses reporting 3 times the number of tips they usually get, a tenth the amount of road rage in Los Angeles and our streets, very little looting, crime rates down. People are generally being nicer to one another. It didn't result in a turnaround in the votes, which surprised me.
Because those flags, I guess, they mean war, they don't mean vote.
Right.
We understand one side.
Well, we kicked this off by talking about the field of candidates. We actually went out on the street and wanted to find out just how well known the candidates were and how much of a grasp most voters had of just who was running and what they stood for. And this is what those folks had to say.
How many of the candidates can you name that are actually running in the race this year?
None of them, actually. I don't follow politics really a lot.
Well, Shell, Nichols, Sidran, and that wacky guy, that Omari.
How many of the candidates can you name, the mayoral candidates?
Omari, Shell, what is the bullhead? Let me, Steven, Shameful, something like that. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of nobody.
Shell, Sidran, Omari, something like that. Garrett. Greg Nichols. That's about it. The guy in the dress.
The guy in the dress?
He's my favorite, actually.
How many candidates can you name?
That are in this on the new race?
The current race?
I think it's 3. I'm not sure. I worry about that the day of.
So it's a concern really on Election Day itself.
Right, basically for me.
Do you know when the Election Day is?
It's the 28th.
Okay.
Correct?
No, not correct.
Oh, God.
There's Mark Sidran, there's Paul Shell. I can't really remember the other one.
Can you name any of the candidates running in the mayor's race?
El causante de tanta desgracia. Se sentía un asesino libre y todos lo felicitaban por eso. No entiendo, se repetía una y otra vez en silencio. El gobierno lo ayudó por un tiempo y después, si quieren ir a la guerra, pregúntele a las viudas, a las madres, a los hijos, a los hermanos, a los amigos de los que murieron en Irak. Por cada lágrima derramada aquí, allá en Irak, hay 100, 1000 lágrimas derramadas, porque hay muchos más muertos que cuesta trabajo contarlos. Y con respecto al que perdió el alma, también perdió el sentido de la vida. El gobierno le ayudó un tiempo y después se desentendió de él y de los demás. La otra vez se le vio tenía un cartón con letras grandes que decía, Homeless Iraq Veteran, please help.
Muy bien. Thank you. Next is Ricardo Alonso Guarnero de Maíz.
Hola. Estoy nervioso. Esta obra es mucho más personal y yo crecí en la frontera de Texas y México y pues esta obra es un pedazo de mi vida. Está en inglés, pero se llama De Maíz. De maíz, my father replies to my mother's query regarding what kind of tortillas he wants with his meal, corn or wheat. Maíz is the perennial response of my father to the oft-repeated question. Maíz, corn tortillas are to my father a political statement, brown and earthy. Flour tortillas are not real Mexican food, he says. They are white, mealy, and without substance. They are white bread. So no matter how stale the corn tortillas or how fresh the flour tortillas are, he always makes his choice quite clear. Maíz. He is not oblivious to the fact that his wife and children are all eating the softer and fluffier flour tortillas. He must draw the line somewhere, the point at which he will not bend. I certainly do not fault him for the small but significant gesture. My father was working in a Nebraska factory at a time when Mexicans and blacks were not allowed to drink from the same fountains as whites. Despite his many compromises, he has not forgotten the insults of being a dark Mexican man in the Jim Crow South. My father was a very strong and proud man. He played baseball like Sammy Sosa. He blocks like De La Hoya, and he was as athletic as Michael Jordan. My father played so many sports, and his hands spent so much time curled around a baseball that the ends of his fingers are permanently warped like the claws of a grizzly bear. Which makes me wonder how some white boy cornhusker could shame him. My father took a share of insults from the gringos who abused him, but he never forgot, and neither do I. Did I mention that my father is not really my father? My stepfather married my mother when I was about a year old. I am the product of a German father who I never met. So strictly speaking, my father is actually my stepfather. My mother insisted that everyone in the house and our friends and our fellow church members should all abide by the artifice that I was the biological son of my stepdad. Everyone knew that this could not be so, for my father was quite dark, with coal black eyes, jet black hair, and not a single feature which might remind one of me. I was fair-skinned, blue-eyed, and blonde as a child, and as Germanic as any Austrian schoolboy. I love my father, my stepfather, but he was not very kind to me, and he never made any pretense to actually being biologically related to me, let alone being my father. The ironic thing is that of all the family members, I was more like my father than any of his other children. I supported my father's gesture on corn, tortillas, I insisted that Thanksgiving dinner include beans, tortillas, and salsa. I spoke against the injustices foisted on Mexicans and Chicanos. I studied Mexican history. I became a socialist with long dark hair, a beard, and the compendium of works of Karl Marx and Che Guevara. The only thing that ever made my father regret any of the beatings and ill treatment that he had dished out was my near death. In 1975, as the U.S. Embassy in Saigon was evacuated and the country was closing the final chapter on the Vietnam War, I was lying in a hospital bed with a prognosis of death. There was nothing that the medics could do but watch me die. My mother and my doctor told me that I would die within a day or two of my admission to the hospital. The doctor did not say that I might die in a day or two. They said that I would die in a day or two. As Oscar Wilde once remarked, nothing focuses the mind like the sight of the gallows. Thus it was that my father pled for my forgiveness. He said that he had not been a good and kind father, and that he regretted the things he had done, or more accurately, the things that he had not done. I told him that there was nothing to forgive. As a teenager facing certain death, I had no taste for pity, penance, or piety. I have always suffered more from the anguish of my parents than from my own suffering. Most assuredly so, given that they are still my parents and that their present actions speak much louder than their pious regrets. All I really want, I thought, is for you, Mom and Dad, to be kind of normal. Instead, my mother demanded that I take Jesus Christ. Did I say take Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and thus be assured a place in heaven in the next few days when I would most certainly meet him as my brain decomposed from asphyxia? This can't be real, thought I. How can I be dying, and the best my parents can do for me is to ask me to accept the polyester, Fox Anglo religion of Jerry Falwell? I knew then and there was no God. I did not want to die at all, but most certainly I did not want to die at the hands of fools. I survived. My mother would exclaim to me and to her congregation, a fellow primitive Methodist, as my Marxist college professor referred to evangelicals, that my survival was a godly miracle. I drew a different conclusion. These primitive rituals were not for me, and they held no fear. I wish I could say that this was a positive turning point in my relationship with my mother and father. No sooner had I been released from the hospital, however, after a 2-week stay, than my father started throwing his nastiest barbs at me. One Sunday thereafter, my short-tempered and violent brother and my half-sister were arguing about something utterly insignificant when my brother decided to settle the matter by throwing a steel-hard gas-cold piece at my sister.
Henry Highland Garnett stepped up to the first black civic forum in Philadelphia in 1835. He looked at all the black men. It was patriarchal. Didn't let the black sisters in. Looked at all the black men there and said, okay, we're here to talk about how we're going to get out from under. And he said, well, one thing you should never do is confuse the situation of black people with that of the Israelites in the Old Testament. For us, Pharaoh was on both sides of the bloody Red Seas. Can't be optimistic. And at that moment, somebody sang a song. Somebody sang a song. Why? Because the music is just not a source of entertainment. It's just not a source of exotic stimulation and titillation. Democracy is about those Sly Stone called everyday people taking back the power in the face of elite abuse of power, and sometimes all you have is just your voice and your body to take the power back.